Hey folks, welcome to my YouTube channel, The Word Above All. I'm Brian Anderson, pastor of the Bridge Church here in Sacramento. We are looking at the book of Romans, and we've come to a very controversial chapter. This is Romans chapter 9, and we're just going to take a look at 3 verses today. Romans 9, verses 19 to 21. You will say to me then, why does he still find fault? For who resists his will? On the contrary, who are you, O man, who answers back to God? The thing molded will not say to the molder, why did you make me like this? Will it? Or does not the potter have a right over the clay to make from the same lump one vessel for honorable use and another for common use? So let's remember the context of where we are in Romans chapter 9. Last time, we took a look at verses 14 to 18, and Paul summarizes his thoughts in verse 18 by saying, so then God grants mercy to whom he desires, and he hardens whom he desires. In other words, the ball is in God's court. God has the ultimate final decision about who's going to receive mercy and who's going to be hardened. And if we back up 2 more verses to verse 16, Paul says, so then it does not depend on the man who chooses or the man who exerts himself, the man who wills or the man who runs, but on God who shows mercy. So Paul said, God is the one who makes this decision about whether you're going to receive mercy or whether you might be hardened. That prompts the objector to have another question. And the question comes up in verse 19. Why does God still find fault? For who resists his will? In other words, why would God hold sinners responsible for their sins and accountable for their actions if the ball is in God's court? If God is completely sovereign and in control of the situation, why would God then hold the sinner responsible? Why would he find fault with him? So that's the question of the objector. He's really saying, isn't the sinner just doing what God has ordained that he would do? And if that is true, why would God find fault with him? Now, Paul's answer, it's not really a direct answer to that question. What he says is, on the contrary, who are you, O man, who answers back to God? In other words, be very careful about how you answer God. Why? Because he is the molder and you are the thing that is molded. Who are you to imply that God Almighty is dealing somehow unrighteously with sinners by finding fault with their actions? Who are you to accuse him or blame him in some way? Who are you, a puny little creature made by the sovereign creator of the universe, the Almighty? Who are you who answers back to God? That's how Paul deals with this whole issue. But why not? Because he says the thing molded will not say to the molder, why did you make me like this? See, what Paul is saying here is that we're creatures. We are the thing molded. God is the molder. Since we are creatures, we have a sovereign creator who has molded us. It's not our place to call him into question because without him, we wouldn't even exist. And then he goes on to talk about the thing molded and the molder and uses an illustration of a potter and the clay. He says in verse 21, does not the potter have a right over the clay to make from the same lump one vessel for honorable use and another for common use? So here's the potter. He's got a lump of clay. He pulls some clay out of that one lump and he makes something very beautiful and honorable, like an exquisite, beautiful vase that he puts up on the mantle to show off to all of the company that come through the house. And then he takes the other part of that clay and he makes a trash can, common use. Does the potter have a right to do that? Well, of course he does. He's the potter. The clay has no right in the matter. The one making it is the one who has the rights. And that's Paul's point. We don't have a right to question God about what he does or does not do in our life. We may not think it's right, but who are we? We are the creature. We are fallen. We are sinful. Our thinking is marred by sin, by the fall. And so it is craziness. It's insanity for us, the creature, to shake our fist and question and blame and accuse God for what he does. We are clay in the potter's hand. And so because he has a right over the clay, It's our part, our duty, to humble ourselves before the potter, to bow ourselves in the dust, to take the low place and acknowledge his right to do with us as he wills.